got no swing except for the ring.
Rock music was at a crossroads. Some bands were breaking records, others were breaking apart. And the songs they left behind, those songs told the whole story. But here is something most people get wrong. The hits you think you know from that year, you only know half the story.
You are only coming through in waves.
Behind the music, behind the fame, behind the noise, there were moments nobody talked about. Decisions that changed everything. Songs that should have lasted forever and almost disappeared completely. 10 of them made this list. And by the time we reach number 1, you are going to hear 1979 in a way you never have before. This is where we start. Number 10, The Knack, My Sharona.
Oh, my little pretty one, my pretty one.
The moment that guitar riff kicks in, you already know it. It does not ask permission. It just grabs you by the collar and pulls you in. This song is raw energy in a 3-minute package.
When you gonna give me some time, Sharona? Will you make my motor?
It is the sound of a band that was hungry, confident, and absolutely certain they had something the world needed to hear. And in the summer of 1979, the world agreed.
My motor, got it coming off of the line, Sharona.
My Sharona was produced by Mike Chapman, a man who understood how to make a rock record hit hard without losing its edge. It came out on Capitol Records and it went straight to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, where it stayed for 6 weeks. 6 weeks! That is not a hit. That is dominance. The song is about obsession, infatuation, that feeling of wanting someone so badly that it takes over your whole brain. It is not complicated lyrically, and that is exactly why it worked. Every teenager who heard it understood it immediately. Every adult who heard it remembered being a teenager. The production is deliberately stripped back. No orchestration, no studio trickery, just guitar, bass, drums, and a vocal that sounds like it was recorded by someone who meant every word.
Come a little closer, close.
By the end of 1979, My Sharona was the best-selling single of the entire year in the United States. Not the best-selling rock single, the best-selling single, period.
Enough to look in my eyes, Sharona. Keep it in a mystery.
The guitar solo in My Sharona was played by Berton Avere, and what most people do not know is that the breakdown section near the end of the song was largely improvised in the studio.
Kissing me, running down the length of my thighs, Sharona.
What you hear on the record is essentially a live performance captured in the moment. No endless retakes, no careful editing, just a musician in a room playing with everything he had. That spontaneity is exactly what makes it feel so alive. Here is the strange thing about My Sharona. It was so massive in 1979 that it almost became a victim of its own success. The backlash came quickly. Critics who had championed the Knack as the saviors of rock music suddenly turned on them when their follow-up material did not maintain the same commercial heights. The band got labeled a one-hit wonder, which was deeply unfair to musicians who were genuinely talented. And that label stuck. So today, My Sharona gets played at nostalgia events, and in films it had a famous resurgence through a movie placement in the 1990s, but the Knack as a band never got the full credit they deserved. The song is remembered. The story behind it is mostly forgotten. What is coming up at number 9 is a completely different kind of rock record, darker, slower, and built around a guitar tone that engineers were still trying to figure out how to recreate years later.
Number 9. Dire Straits, Sultans of Swing, default text.
You get a shiver in the dark, it's raining in the park, but meantime.
This song does not rush, it takes its time. It walks in, finds a seat, orders a drink, and then it absolutely owns the room. Sultans of Swing is the kind of track that reminds you what a guitar is actually capable of in the hands of someone who truly understands it. Not loud for the sake of loud. Not fast for the sake of fast. Just a precise, soulful, completely in control.
Sound of the river, you stop and you hold.
Dire Straits recorded Sultans of Swing for their debut album, released in 1978. But the single found its real momentum through 1979, particularly in the United States, where it climbed to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. In the UK it had already charted. But America took it to another level entirely.
Everything. A band is
The song tells the story of a jazz band playing to a nearly empty pub on a Tuesday night, musicians who are brilliant but completely unknown, and somehow that story about obscurity became one of the most famous rock songs of its era. There is a beautiful irony in that.
blowing Dixie, double fall time.
The production by Muff Winwood kept things clean and honest, no overdubs piled on top of each other, no artificial brightness, just the band playing live in a room, captured as naturally as possible. Sultans of Swing announced a guitarist to the world whose name would become synonymous with tone and technique for decades.
You feel alright when you hear the music ring.
The original demo of Sultans of Swing was recorded on a basic home setup nowhere near a professional studio. A BBC radio producer heard an early version and was impressed enough to give the band airplay, which helped generate the buzz that led to their record deal. Think about that, a home demo, radio play, record deal, number 4 in America.
Well, now you stand
Sometimes the song just speaks for itself. Sultans of Swing is not forgotten in the traditional sense most rock fans know it, but it is underrated as a piece of storytelling. People remember the guitar.
inside, but you don't see too many faces.
They quote the guitar, but the actual narrative inside the song, the portrait of unrecognized talent, of musicians playing for the love of it in an empty room, that part gets glossed over. And that story is the heart of the whole thing.
Coming in out of the rain, they hear the jazz go down.
Hold On, because number 8 is a song that almost never made it onto the album it came from, and the reason why involves a band disagreement that nearly ended everything before it began.
Competition.
5-minute retention break if this countdown is hitting right. Smash that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel bring more real rock history to people who actually care about the music. Now let us keep going, we are just getting started.
Hey, Rocklore community. Before we continue, let's have a real talk for a second, bro. You know, this isn't just a channel to us. And I hope it's not just a place you come to watch a video and then forget about it. This is a community. It's a place where we get to dig up the secrets of rock and roll, share our favorite riffs, and celebrate the artists who maybe didn't get the love they deserved. Right now, only about 1% of our viewers are subscribed. We can change that together and grow this community. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button with the notification bell on. When you do, you're not just helping a channel grow, you're becoming a member of the Rocklore family. You're signaling to us and to YouTube that these stories matter, that this music is worth preserving, and that this community is a place you want to be. Subscribing is your way of making sure you're always in the loop. It means you'll be the first to know when we unearth a forgotten legend, drop a new countdown, or dive into a piece of rock history you've never heard before. So if you're a true fan of the lore, if you get that same feeling of discovery that I do, then come join us. It takes 1 second to be a part of something bigger.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 8, The Cars. Just what I needed.
I don't mind you coming here.
There is a coolness to this song that almost feels effortless. Like the band wrote it on a Tuesday afternoon, recorded it Wednesday morning, and by Thursday they already knew it was going to be something special.
Wasting all my time. 'Cause when you're standing out,
It sits right on the line between classic rock and new wave, 1 foot in each world, and it is completely comfortable in that space. Guitar-driven but polished, emotional but never sentimental.
so near, I kinda lose my mind.
The Cars came out of Boston and brought something genuinely new to rock music. In the late 1970s, Just What I Needed appeared on their self-titled debut album, produced by Roy Thomas Baker, the same man behind some of the most important rock records of that decade.
It's not the perfume that you wear. It's not
The album came out in 1978, but the song continued to define 1979 radio in America. Lyrically, it is deceptively simple, a song about someone who fills a void, who arrives at exactly the right moment.
the ribbons in your hair. I don't mind you coming here.
But there is an ambivalence underneath it. The narrator is not entirely sure if what he feels is real or just convenience. That emotional complexity is what gives it staying power.
And wasting all my time.
The Cars became one of the best-selling debut acts of their era, and Just What I Needed was the song that opened the door. MTV, when it launched a couple of years later, would make the Cars one of its signature bands. But the foundation was built here, in 1979, on the strength of this song. Rick Ocasek, the band's lead vocalist and primary songwriter, wrote the core of Just What I Needed before the Cars even existed as a complete band. It was sitting in a notebook waiting for the right musicians to bring it to life. The song found its band, and the band found their sound. The Cars went on to have such a strong run of singles and albums through the early 1980s that their debut material sometimes gets overshadowed by what came later. Newer fans who discovered them through their more polished later work sometimes never dig back to where it all started. And Just What I Needed, raw, confident, slightly rough around the edges, is where it started.
Don't mind you hanging out and talking in your sleep.
Number 7 is where the energy completely shifts. We are going darker, heavier, and into a song that radio programmers genuinely did not know what to do with when it first arrived. Number 7. Rainbow. Since You've Been Gone.
I get the same old dreams, same time every night. Fall
If you ever needed a song to sing at the top of your lungs when you were angry and heartbroken at the same time, this was it. Pure arena rock. Big guitars, bigger chorus. The kind of song that was built for stadiums and felt completely at home in your bedroom at the same time.
to the ground and I wake up. So I get out of bed.
Rainbow understood something important, that rock music could be emotionally direct without being weak, that you could shout about pain and still sound powerful. Since You've Been Gone was produced by Roger Glover and appeared on Rainbow's Down to Earth album in 1979.
Put on my shoes and in my head, thoughts right back to the breakup.
It reached number 6 on the UK singles chart and became one of the defining rock anthems of the year in Britain. The song was actually written by Russ Ballard, not by Rainbow themselves, which surprised many fans who assumed it was an original composition.
These four walls are closing in.
The band took it and made it completely their own, largely through the sheer force of the performance. Lyrically, it is a breakup song, simple, direct, but the production transforms it into something that feels enormous.
Look at the fix you put me in. Since you've been gone.
The chorus has that quality where the first time you hear it, you already feel like you have known it your whole life. In the UK rock scene, this track was a massive moment for Rainbow, helping them transition from a musician's band respected mainly by hardcore rock fans into genuine mainstream chart contenders.
Since you've been gone, I'm out of my head, can't take.
The song was initially considered a risk for Rainbow because their existing fan base expected heavier, more complex material. Their earlier work was progressive and demanding, Since You've Been Gone was direct and accessible, and some long-term fans were not happy about that shift. The irony is that the song reached more people in 3 minutes than all of their previous complex compositions combined. Rainbow's legacy is complicated by the fact that the band went through multiple lineup changes and stylistic shifts throughout their career. Different fans claim different eras as the definitive version of the band, and that internal debate means no single period gets the unified celebration it deserves. Since You've Been Gone sits in a middle chapter that sometimes gets squeezed out of the conversation. But as a pure rock single, it is close to perfect. Number 6 is coming up, and this one involves a band that was supposed to be finished in 1979. Everything pointed to the end, and then one song changed the entire trajectory of what came next. Number 6. Fleetwood Mac, Tusk.
Why don't you ask if he's gonna stay?
After one of the biggest selling albums in music history, what do you do next? If you are Fleetwood Mac in 1979, you do something completely unexpected, something strange, something that confuses your record label, divides your fan base, and costs a fortune to make. Tusk is that song.
Why don't you ask if he's gone away?
And it is brilliant precisely because it should not work and somehow absolutely does. Tusk was released as the lead single from the double album of the same name on Warner Brothers Records. The production was unconventional. Lindsey Buckingham pushed the band into experimental territory that was a deliberate rejection of the polished, accessible sound that had made their previous album a global phenomenon. The song features the USC Trojans Marching Band, an actual university marching band recorded live at Dodger Stadium. That sound you hear underneath the track is not a synthesizer or a studio effect. It is 200 musicians playing in a sports arena.
Why don't you tell me what's going on? Why don't
Warner Brothers reportedly spent over $1 million recording the album, an almost unimaginable budget for 1979.
you tell me who's on the phone?
The label was nervous. The band was pushing boundaries. And the result was a song that reached number 8 in the US and number 6 in the UK, respectable numbers, but far below what the label had hoped for, given the investment. Lindsey Buckingham has said in interviews that Tusk was partly a reaction to his own internal conflict within the band. The relationships inside Fleetwood Mac at that point were complicated, to put it very gently, and the strange, almost tribal energy of Tusk was a way of expressing something that could not be said in a conventional love song. The marching band was not a gimmick. It was a statement. Tusk gets remembered as the weird follow-up to something perfect, and that framing the weird follow-up has followed it ever since. Critics and casual fans often skip straight from the previous album to the band's later work, treating Tusk as a detour rather than a destination.
Why don't you ask what?
But for people who actually sit with it, it is one of the most interesting things Fleetwood Mac ever recorded. Brave, odd, completely uncompromising. That is not a detour. That is an artist making a real decision.
What's going on? Why don't you ask the latest?
Number 5 is where this countdown gets personal, because the song coming up next was attached to a controversy that followed the band for years, and I have been building toward telling you the full story since the beginning of this video. Number 5, The Who, and the story around Won't Get Fooled Again in 1979 and what was really happening behind it. By 1979, The Who carried something that most bands never have to carry: grief. Real, devastating, life-changing grief. And the question everyone in the rock world was asking quietly, respectfully, but asking was whether a band that had lost what they lost could still be The Who. Could the music survive what happened to the people making it? Won't Get Fooled, again, had originally appeared on the 1971 album Who's Next, but its live performances in 1979, captured on the Kids Are Alright film and soundtrack, brought it back into the cultural conversation with enormous force. The song about revolution, disillusionment, and the painful cycle of hope and betrayal felt, in 1979, more relevant than ever. The band had just lost their drummer Keith Moon in September 1978, and the 1979 period represented their first major public presence after that loss. The live versions of this song from that era carry something you cannot manufacture. You can hear it in Roger Daltrey's voice. You can feel it in Pete Townshend's guitar. This was a band playing through something real. The scream in Won't Get Fooled Again, the one that comes just before the final section, is considered by many vocal coaches and rock historians to be one of the greatest moments ever captured on a rock recording. Roger Daltrey has spoken about how that scream was entirely instinctive. There was no plan for it. It just came out. Some of the best moments in rock music were never planned. Controversy payoff, The Who, and 1979. Now, I told you early in this video that one of these entries carried a story bigger than the song itself. And this is that moment. Because what was happening around The Who in 1979 is not just music history, it is human history. Keith Moon died in September 1978. He was 32 years old. And the way the music industry and the media handled what came next is something worth examining honestly. There were immediate questions about whether the band should continue. Some people said continuing was disrespectful. Others said stopping would be the real betrayal of the music, of Keith, of everything they had built together. In interviews from this period, Pete Townshend and Roger Daltrey gave different answers at different times, which makes complete sense when you understand that there is no right answer to that question. Grief does not follow a schedule, and two people inside the same loss can feel very differently about what comes next. The record label had financial interests in the band continuing. Tours had been booked, film projects were in motion. The machinery of the music industry does not pause for human pain. And there are different versions of how much pressure was applied and from which direction. What we know is this: the band chose to continue with a new drummer. And the 1979 live performances, particularly those captured on film, show a band playing with an emotional intensity that was almost difficult to watch, because you knew what was underneath it. Some critics at the time called the continuation a mistake. Some called it brave. Some said it was commercially motivated. The truth, as always, is more complicated than any of those three things. What the 1979 performances proved, and what Won't Get Fooled Again proved every time they played it, is that music can carry grief in a way that nothing else can. The song became a vessel for something the band could not say in interviews or press releases or public statements. They said it through the music. But the world looks just the same in history. And that is why this is not just a rock song. It is a document of real human experience, played on a real stage, by real people who were hurting. That is what makes it history. We ain't changed, 'cause
the banners they all flown.
The 1979 chapter of The Who's story gets compressed into a footnote about transition and loss. The before and after get discussed. The actual year, with its raw, grief-charged performances, tends to get skipped over.
In the last war.
Do not skip it. Go find the footage from this period. Watch their faces. Listen to how they play. It will tell you more about what music actually is than almost anything else you will ever see. We are moving into the top 4 now, and number 4 is a song that proved rock music could cross every cultural boundary it was supposed to respect. The story of how it happened will genuinely surprise you. 15-minute retention break. We are deep in this now. Which song on this countdown has hit you hardest so far? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. Now let us finish this strong. Number 4, AC/DC, Highway to Hell. Some songs announce themselves. Highway to Hell does not announce itself. It arrives like it already owns the place. That opening riff is one of the most recognizable moments in all of rock music. And what makes it work, what makes it genuinely great rather than just loud, is how perfectly every single element serves the song. Nothing wasted, nothing extra, just pure, focused rock energy. Highway to Hell was produced by Robert John Mutt Lang, a producer who understood that great rock music needed space to breathe, and that the best recordings sounded like a live band playing at full power rather than a studio construction project. The album came out in 1979 on Atlantic Records and represented AC/DC's breakthrough into international markets. They had been building a fierce following in Australia and had made progress in the UK, but Highway to Hell was the moment America took them seriously. The lyrics are not literally about hell or death or darkness, despite what some radio programmers and concerned parent groups decided to believe. They are about the exhausting reality of life on the road, tour buses, motels, the relentless grind of being in a working rock band. The song was autobiographical in the most honest way possible. It reached number 47 on the US Billboard Hot 100 Modest by chart standards, but its impact on rock radio and concert culture was enormous and immediate. Highway to Hell was the last album recorded with the band's original lead vocalist Bon Scott, who passed away in February 1980. The album therefore carries a weight that nobody knew it would carry when it was being made. Bon Scott recorded those vocals with no idea they would become his final studio statement to the world. Listening to the record today, knowing what happened next changes how it feels. Completely. The song itself is not forgotten, but the Bon Scott era of AC/DC and what made it specifically different from everything that followed sometimes gets lost in the broader celebration of the band's catalog. Bon Scott was not just a vocalist. He was a specific character, a specific voice, a specific energy. And Highway to Hell is the fullest expression of that energy ever captured on record. That deserves more than a greatest hits inclusion. It deserves a proper conversation.
No stop signs, speed limit. No.
Number 3 is a song that came from a band everyone had written off, and the fact that it exists at all is something close to a miracle. The story of how it was made is one of the best comeback narratives in rock history. Number 3, Supertramp, the Logical Song.
When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful.
This song asks you a question. And it is a question that if you are honest with yourself, you still do not have a complete answer to.
A miracle, oh, it was beautiful, magical.
The logical song is about the moment childhood ends, and the world starts telling you who you are supposed to be, and whether the person they are describing has anything to do with who you actually are inside. That question does not age. It was true in 1979. It is true right now.
And all the birds in the trees, will they be singing so happily?
The logical song was the lead single from Supertramp's Breakfast in America album, one of the best-selling albums of 1979, produced by the band alongside Peter Henderson and released on A&M Records.
Oh, joyfully, oh, playfully, watching me.
The lyrics were written by Roger Hodgson and draw directly from his personal experience of being sent away to boarding school as a child, the feeling of being shaped and molded by systems that care more about producing a certain kind of person than understanding who you actually are.
But then they sent me away.
It reached number 6 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and number 7 in the UK. The album went to number 1 in multiple countries and sold tens of millions of copies worldwide, making Supertramp one of the biggest rock acts on the planet in 1979.
Teach me how to be sensible, logical. Oh,
The combination of piano-driven melody, synthesizer, and that raw vocal performance created something that sat between progressive rock and pop in a way that nobody had quite managed before.
responsible, practical. And then they show me a world.
Roger Hodgson has said that the lyrics to the logical song came to him quite quickly, almost like they had been waiting to be written. The personal experience behind the words was so specific and so deeply felt that once he started writing, it did not take long to find the shape of it.
I could be so dependable, or clinical.
Songs that come from real places tend to arrive faster than songs that are constructed deliberately. The emotion already knows where it wants to go. Supertramp fell out of fashion quite sharply as the 1980s progressed and the musical landscape changed around them.
Oh, intellectual, cynical.
Their particular blend of progressive rock and accessible melody felt, to some critics, like it belonged to a previous era. And the eventual creative separation between the band's two main songwriters meant that the unified creative voice that produced the logical song could never be fully reconstructed.
There are times when all the world's asleep.
What remains is this song, asking the same question it always asked, still waiting for a proper answer.
The questions run too deep.
Number 2 is darker than anything we have covered so far, a song built around a subject that radio programmers actively avoided, and that made the band's record label genuinely nervous about releasing it, and they released it anyway. Number 2, Pink Floyd, Comfortably Numb.
Is there anybody in there?
There are very few moments in rock music that feel like this. That guitar solo, the second one, the long one near the end, is not just technically brilliant, it is emotionally devastating in a way that is almost impossible to explain to someone who has not felt it.
Just not if you can hear me.
Comfortably Numb sounds like the inside of a mind that has checked out, disconnected, present in body but somewhere else entirely in spirit. And for millions of people who heard it,
Is there anyone at home?
it was the most accurate description of how they felt that anyone had ever put to music. Comfortably Numb appeared on Pink Floyd's The Wall,
Come on now. I hear you feeling.
a double album released in 1979 on Harvest and Columbia Records, produced by the band alongside Bob Ezrin. The album itself is a concept record, a full narrative about isolation, trauma, and the psychological walls people build around themselves.
I can ease your pain.
The song emerged from a real moment. Roger Waters had become seriously ill before a concert, and a doctor had injected him with medication that left him feeling disconnected from his own body. That specific physical sensation being present but numbed became the core of the song.
Get you on your feet again.
David Gilmour's guitar solos on this track are considered by many musicians and critics to be among the finest ever recorded in the rock genre. The tone, the phrasing, the emotional arc of the solos, they tell a story without a single word. The Wall went to #1 in multiple countries and produced one of the most famous rock films of its era. Comfortably Numb became one of the defining songs of the entire album. Roger Waters and David Gilmour actually disagreed about the chord structure of the song during the recording sessions. Waters preferred a simpler approach. Gilmour pushed for something more complex harmonically. In the end, a version closer to Gilmour's vision made it to the final record.
Can you show me where it hurts?
The guitar solo you love, the one that sounds like it is reaching for something beyond the room it was recorded in, exists partly because of that creative argument.
There is no pain you are receiving.
Sometimes the best music comes from people who refuse to agree with each other. Comfortably, Numb is not forgotten. It is one of the most streamed classic rock songs of the modern era. But the depth of what it is actually about gets flattened over time into vague associations with detachment and drugs. The real story, the isolation, the relationship between the performer and the audience, the desperate disconnection at the heart of The Wall, that full context gets lost when the song becomes just a classic rock radio staple. It deserves to be heard as the full emotional statement it was always meant to be.
You are only coming through in way.
And now we are here. #1, the song that sits at the top of this list, not just because of how it sounds, but because of what it cost to make it, what it meant when it came out, and why it still means something today. Here we go.
Hey, Rocklore community. Before we continue, let's have a real talk for a second, bro. You know, this isn't just a channel to us. And I hope it's not just a place you come to watch a video and then forget about it. This is a community. It's a place where we get to dig up the secrets of rock and roll, share our favorite riffs, and celebrate the artists who maybe didn't get the love they deserved. Right now, only about 1% of our viewers are subscribed. We can change that together and grow this community. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button with the notification bell on. When you do, you're not just helping a channel grow, you're becoming a member of the Rocklore family. You're signaling to us and to YouTube that these stories matter, that this music is worth preserving, and that this community is a place you want to be. Subscribing is your way of making sure you're always in the loop. It means you'll be the first to know when we unearth a forgotten legend, drop a new countdown, or dive into a piece of rock history you've never heard before. So if you're a true fan of the lore, if you get that same feeling of discovery that I do, then come join us. It takes 1 second to be a part of something bigger.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful.
#1, The Clash, London Calling.
London calling to the faraway town.
Some songs are good, some songs are great, and then there are the ones that feel like a warning. London Calling is a warning. It always was. From the very first second the bass drop, the guitar, Joe Strummer's voice cutting through everything, you feel that this is not just a rock song.
Now war is declared and battle come down. London
This is somebody standing on a rooftop and shouting something true at a world that is not listening. And 45 years later it's still shouting.
calling to the underworld. Come out of the cupboard. You bought
London Calling was released as a double album in December 1979, deliberately priced low so that more people could afford to buy it. The Clash insisted on that price point against the wishes of their label CBS. That decision tells you everything about where the band's priorities were.
boys and girls. London calling. Now don't look to us.
Produced by Guy Stevens, a charismatic, unconventional producer whose energy in the studio was as important as his technical decisions. The album was recorded at Wessex Sound Studios in London. The sessions were intense, fast, and driven by a creative urgency that the band has spoken about in interviews as feeling almost outside of their control.
Phony Beatlemania has bitten the dust. London calling.
The title track deals with nuclear threat, climate anxiety, social collapse, rising seas, and the feeling that civilization is fragile in ways that polite society does not want to acknowledge.
See, we ain't got no swing except for the ring of the crunch of.
In 1979, with the Cold War still a daily reality, with economic crisis gripping Britain, with social unrest building toward what would become the riots of the early 1980s, the song was not hyperbole. It was reporting.
The ice age is coming, the sun's zooming in, melt.
London Calling was named the greatest rock album of the 1980s by Rolling Stone magazine despite being released in 1979. That is how far ahead of its time it was.
Down expected, the wheat is going thin, engine stop running.
The iconic image on the album cover, Paul Simon smashing his bass guitar on a stage, was captured by photographer Penny Smith, who almost did not take the shot because she thought she was too far away and the image would be blurry. She took it anyway.
And I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning out.
The photograph became one of the most famous images in rock history, and the blurriness that she worried about became part of what made it feel so urgent and alive. Sometimes the imperfect moment is the perfect moment.
Live by the river to the imitation soul.
London Calling is critically celebrated, but it lives in a kind of museum space now. It gets listed on greatest albums polls, it gets included in documentary series about rock history. It gets respectful mentions.
Forget it, brother, you can go it alone. London.
What it deserves is to be heard as the living, breathing, furious piece of art it actually is, not as a historical artifact, not as a critical landmark. As a record that was made by people who were genuinely afraid of what the world was becoming and who decided that the right response was to plug in and play.
Calling to the zombies of death, quit holding out and draw.
In 2026, with everything happening in the world, the things London Calling was warning about feel closer than they ever have. That is not a coincidence. That is a great song doing exactly what a great song is supposed to do.
Another breath, London calling, and I don't want to shout.
The Clash did not make London Calling to be comfortable. They made it to be honest. And honesty, real honesty, does not expire.